Chapter 616 Returning to Elmora. 3. A castle was perched alone atop a cliff, surrounded on all sides by tiny towns. It had been standing there for many centuries, heavily worn out from the times. With some mismatched towers and asymmetrical designs, it had a fairly crude appearance. Even yet, it did not lessen the imposing impression it left. But in contrast to its imposing exterior, it was completely empty inside. In a large hall where large banners cascaded down the sides and a large throne sat at the far end, a meeting was taking place. "We've lost ground. The demons will reach the city within the next year." The orc kneeled down on one foot. 1 year. A low, solemn voice filled the room. "How long will our supplies last?" 5 years. "Supplies aren't a problem." "I see." Silence descended on the room. It was only after a while that the voice once again echoed. "You may leave." "Understood, Chief." Standing on 2 feet, the orc thumped his chest once and left the hall. Silik kept his gaze locked on the orc until he left the hall. Once he left, only his presence and pressure filled the room. 40 years. Today marked the 40th year that he had been the Orson chief. The path wasn't simple. He only succeeded in becoming chief by pure luck. Had it not been for that human that had helped him many years ago, none of this would have been possible. He was then able to prevent the orcs from losing the conflict and forcing a stalemate with the demons. Unfortunately, it didn't look like this deadlock would last much longer. The demons proved to be far too powerful for them to handle, and the orcs were overwhelmed by the lack of reinforcements, losing more than 3/4 of their forces during the course of the previous 10 years. There might be a way. Thump. Silik pressed his foot against the hard ground. Immediately, the hall trembled and a shockwave pulsed in an outward manner. Cracks began to form beneath the throne as Silik slowly stood up from the throne. Prick, prick, prick. The cracks quickly became larger, and the throne behind him began to slant into one of them. Soon after, a hole started to appear and the throne sank into it. Silik stepped toward the black hole where the chair fell, and he similarly fell. Thump. His feet crashed against the earth as rocks raced past him after he fell directly down the hole for more than 10 seconds. "It's dark." His voice echoed throughout the dark space. The only thing he could see at the moment was an endless darkness. Aside from that, he could also hear a faint rhythmic breathing coming from the distance. Pressing his large foot against the ground, Silik extended his hand toward the right until he felt a rough surface. Only then did he channel his aura, and he pressed with much more force. Rumble. The room started to shake. In the process, Silik's thick and muscular arms erupted in a darkish green glow that snaked forth like several snakes and connected with the wall, gliding along the bricks and illuminating the surroundings. It didn't take long for the darkness to disappear. Better. Silik was left satisfied once the room was brightly lit and he was able to get a good look at his surroundings. He wasn't satisfied for long as his face once again turned solemn once he turned around to face a certain direction. There a cell stood. Thick metal bars with small gaps in between, a dense rotting smell and long chains that were connected to the ground. "It has been a while, Omgolung," Silik greeted when he faced the cell. His slightly greener than dark eyes fixed on the chained figure inside the cell. His features were somewhat hidden by long white hair that covered his face and muscles that were only half as large as they had once been, but nonetheless, the figure still bore a striking resemblance to the figure he knew in the past. He was none other than the previous Orson chief, Omgolung, the only orc in Elmora who rivaled his strength, and the person whom he defeated in order to become the next chief in line. Someone who used to stand at the peak of the planet. "With the ongoing war, it has been hard for me to visit you." The room fell silent for a moment. Omgolung, whose head was hung low, slowly raised it till his eyes met Silik's. "We're about to lose, aren't we?" A croaky and deep voice echoed out from his mouth. Silik's face changed upon hearing his words. Nonetheless, he nodded his head. "We are." He was honest with his reply. There was no point in hiding anything. "I see." Omgolung lowered his head, his tone fading a little. Silik took this moment to speak. "I need your help." His words were straightforward, just like how orcs were. It was within their culture to go straight to the point instead of going at things in a roundabout manner. Though prideful, they were never the ones that shied away from asking for help from each other. It was this trait that made them extremely formidable. "I help." Omgolung once again raised his head, blinking his languid eyes. Asking for my help after all of these years have passed? What makes you think I will help you? Because of the people. Silik calmly replied. His tone contained unbounded confidence. We don't have any longer than a year before the demons arrive. If by then nothing happens, we will go extinct from this planet. All of the orcs that have survived will die, and we will be nothing but rotting corpses and bones. Silence once again descended on the room as Amalug quietly stared at Silik. What if I betray you? The mood became very tense as a result of his words. For the next moment, the two figures continued staring at each other without saying anything. They seemed to be gauging each other. So be it. Silik's response didn't come long after that. He then stepped forward and pressed both hands against the thick metal bars. What difference will 1 year make with now? So what if you betray me? I will die regardless of choices. If so, I will gladly gamble on this choice. Pulling the bars apart with his arms, Silik's muscles began to bulge and a creaking sound echoed out. It didn't take long for the bars to bend to the side, allowing Silik to step forward. He arrived before Omgolung in no time. Taking a deep breath, he knelt down on one knee and extended his hand. Will you join my hand and help me avert this calamity and help our people live? Or will you allow our people to die knowing that you could have helped? The situation looks quite grim. I stood atop a hill to overlook our surroundings when I heard Ava's voice coming from beside me. With her hand extended, a bird gently paused on her arm. Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment before reopening them and looking at me. The situation does not look good. Most of the land has already been overtaken by the demons. There doesn't seem to be any orcs in the vicinity. Is that so? I turned to look at Angelica. Do you feel anything? Let me check. Just like Ava did a moment ago, Angelica closed her eyes. It didn't take long for her to open her eyes again. We shouldn't be too far off from Silik. I might be able to communicate with him if we get closer. All right. Angelica's words were enough to make me understand what our next courses of action were. I stepped forward and fell down the cliff we were on. There was no time to waste. A whole different, far grander castle rose atop a little rocky cliff from the one where Silik lived. It was much larger and more impressive. Thin, long bridges that hung precariously in the air connected the castle's gates to a nearby mountain, with an endless abyss beneath. Another meeting was taking place. How long will it take for your forces to reach the Orson stronghold, Azeroth? A deep and sinister voice resounded inside a large majestic hall. Lined up in front of a large golden throne were several figures who knelt on the ground on one knee. It will take no longer than a month. Marquis Azeroth replied in a detached tone. Give me your orders and I will take the chance to eliminate the orcs. The demons sat on the throne fell into deep thought. No, we will hold on from attacking for now. They eventually shook their head. I've received orders from the higher demons that reinforcements will be coming soon. Big plans are ahead of this planet, and our time in this place is almost up. I understand. Marquis Azeroth lowered his head and no longer pressed. Secretly, he was unsatisfied. They appeared to still be quite apprehensive about putting an end to the conflict despite being so close to victory. He was incredibly irritated by this, but as a Marquis-ranked demon he was powerless to say anything. He may have been the strongest in the past, but this was no longer the case. Azeroth's head suddenly snapped in a certain direction as he felt something at that same instant. Something extremely familiar to him. It didn't take long for his formerly serene visage, at least on the outside, to twist viciously as his jaws tightened hard. You're finally here. He was back. Chapter 617 Kevin's Dilemma. 2 days have passed since Ren went to Amora. Nothing changed in Ashton City during that time. Everything was just as calm as it had been for the past couple of years. Of course, that was merely on the surface level. Anyone in a high position knew that this was the calm before the storm. And it wasn't just any regular storm, but a large storm. One that would severely affect the conditions of the human domain in the near future. That was due to the fact that the truce between the Union and the Monolith will expire in less than a month, ushering in the start of a new era. An era that was filled with conflict and death. Why are you so confident that they will declare war on us as soon as the truce is over? A gathering was taking place at the top of the Union Tower. Currently, all of the top tankers were present, including Kevin, who stood beside Monica, and Donna, who was also present and standing beside him. It was clear to see that they belonged to the same faction inside of the Union. Monica's faction. It is not a matter of why anymore, Monica. Daphne, the now third-ranked hero, spoke up. She began to explain the situation to her. Over the past few years, we have observed that the monolith has used this opportunity to consolidate their authority and influence. Their forces are stronger and more powerful than ever. And although it isn't confirmed, we can conclude from that there is a high chance of a war breaking out between the two of us. Also, have you not noticed, Monica? Daphne paused while her eyes swept over everyone in the room. Have you not noticed how both the demons and the members of the monolith have become so quiet right after that crack appeared in the air? Monica immediately became calm after hearing her remarks, sitting back in her chair and thinking to herself. Before she could say anything else, Maximus spoke up. Regarding the crack, I think this will be useful for all of you to look at. He then pressed his hand against the desk and a hologram appeared in the air. The image of an elf appeared in the video. Everyone in the room was familiar with the video that was currently being displayed. A manifestation of the most recent cataclysm is the crack that has appeared in the atmosphere. The main objective of the crack is to fill the planet with as much mana as possible in order to open the door for monsters from the demon world to arrive. Previously, due to the planet's low mana density, dungeon creatures could not survive on the surface for very long. This isn't true though when there is a lot of mana in the world of humans. If it were to occur, monsters would be free to wander the earth, allowing the demons to start a blown-out war against humanity. Pressing his hand against the desk once more, Maximus ended the video. Then, scanning the faces of everyone present in the room, he solemnly said, "I'm sure most of you have already seen the video before. With more reports talking about dungeon overflows becoming more prominent and the monsters no longer dying like in the past as soon as they enter the earth, it is safe to assume that we don't have much longer before the third calamity hits. It's just like Rin has stated in the past during the press conference that almost everyone here is all too familiar with. The third calamity is no longer a question of if it will come but a matter of when it will come." The tension in the room rose at his words. Regardless, Maximus continued to say his piece. "I don't exactly know when the third calamity will hit, but it is within the reasonable assumption that it will take no less than 10 years. And during that time, the most appropriate thing for an organization that is linked with the demons would be to try their best to weaken humanity." When they heard his comments, everyone's expression turned ugly. In a sense, everyone already knew this, but it wasn't until it was brought to their attention that they truly understood how serious the situation was. The only one in the room whose face didn't change was in fact Kevin, who kept his head lowered with his eyes closed. He already knew all of this. But he knew more. The third cataclysm wasn't going to hit in 10 years, but rather 4 years. Or perhaps even 2 years considering a certain factor. The situation was a lot more dire than the people inside the room knew. One couldn't begin to describe how helpless it was. If that weren't enough, all the other organizations pitted against the three races, with the exception of Inferno, which Rin had largely cleared out, were going to start waging war against the respective races not long from now. Regarding Inferno, it wasn't actually over just yet. Unfortunately, Inferno wasn't that easily defeated. There were a couple of remnants that survived and might cause significant damage to the dwarves in the near future. Not to the point of destruction, but enough to make them feel the pain. Next up, Octavius, how close are you from breaking through to SSS-rank? Maximus asked, shifting the conversation away from the situation on Earth. Everyone's eyes fell on Octavius once Maximum's words fell. He, who sat at the far end of the round table, slowly opened his eyes. A terrifying and tanglable pressure emitted from his body once he opened his eyes. Everyone held their breath while they waited for him to answer. They were unfortunately left disappointed with his answer. "I'm still not there yet." Hearing his remarks caused everyone's hearts to clench. Even while no one was certain if Malik al-Shaytan had attained the level of SSS-. Just the idea that there was a rumor of him doing so was enough to leave them feeling helpless in the face of the unexpected circumstance. Coupled with the fact that he signed a contract with a demon, granting him more power than those that didn't have a contract, everyone felt their hearts sink at the revelation. "Are you at least close?" Monica asked, clinging to the little hope they had regarding the situation. Unfortunately, she did not get the answer she wanted. "No, I'm not close." The atmosphere became even more somber after he said these words. For the following minutes, No one said anything as an uncomfortable silence swept the surroundings. Let's end the meeting now. The meeting came to an end when Octaviois casually got up. He turned around and left the area without saying anything further. Following his example, the others also stood up and left one by one. Judging from the looks on the faces of some of the people present, it was clear that they were filled with anxiety regarding the future of the Earth. Even Monica was quite shaken after the meeting as she remained quiet throughout the walk back, something that was unusual of her. "What are you doing, Kevin?" It was her words that brought Kevin out of his thoughts. Lowering his head to glance at Monica, he smiled. "Nothing, I was just thinking about the situation." That was a lie. He was trying to recall a few faces at the moment. Although it didn't appear that way at first glance, this meeting was immensely detrimental to the Union. Especially in light of the fact that several top-ranked heroes were invited to participate and not just the heads. It was from this meeting that several people made up their minds to betray the Union and join the monolith. Kevin's mind was preoccupied with trying to find ways to silently eliminate them. He didn't even bother thinking about changing them. No, he much rather have them eliminated. It was the fastest and most efficient way. Kevin knew that this was a necessary step in order for him to raise the chances of beating the monolith. Even then, he knew that they were merely the stepping stone to the real war. "What are you going to do now, Kevin?" Monica stopped and looked at Kevin. Kevin gave her a simple smile and stopped as well. "I still have something to do, so I won't be following you." Monica narrowed her eyes and nodded. "Alright, suit yourself. I've got stuff to do as well." She then turned to look at Donna. "You? I'll go with you. I've got something to talk about with you." "Oh, okay." Waving goodbye to Kevin, the two disappeared in one of the corridors. Making sure that their figures were completely gone, the smile on Kevin's face faded. He then made his way toward his office, which was located on one of the bottom floors. Only when he was in his office that he finally relaxed. "I need to hurry." He sat down on the edge of the desk and outstretched his hand. On the palm of his hand, a red book started to progressively take shape. His palm began to glow white, encompassing the crimson book as it did so. The book began to slowly become engulfed in a cocoon-like white light, which caused it to fall flat onto the top of his palm. Then the pages started to turn. In a state of complete calmness, Kevin kept his eyes on the book until a series of notification prompts appeared in front of him. == Time codex abortion. 0%, 16%, 100%, == synchronization equals +5%, He lost consciousness soon after. Chapter 6:18 Kevin's Dilemma. Synchronization 5. The world was shrouded in melancholy as ashy gray clouds filled the sky. Wai-yang. A dazzling light burst forth in the middle of the vacant space and quickly spread everywhere. The gloomy clouds then parted under a terrible pressure that stretched toward the entire world. A human figure with distinct facial characteristics was visible within the illumination. The air vibrated as a result of the pressure the figure was emitting. Whoever the figure was, they were an absolute master. Soon enough, the brightness diminished and the human form within the brilliant light became more and more distinct. A black-clad male with two crimson-colored eyes finally emerged in the air as the light dimmed completely. Taking a step back, the crimson-eyed figure looked towards the horizon with an uncharacteristically serious expression. Ryup. It was then that a hand suddenly stretched out of thin air, grasping the sky and tearing it apart as though it was tangible. White hair, red blood eyes, and fair skin. Out of the darkness came a figure that appeared human. He appeared to be rather ordinary, but only someone with strength approaching the boundaries of the human limit could realize what a miserable existence he actually led. The power hidden in this weak-looking body could wipe out the planet with a single wave of his palm. It was horrible. Devastation was what the white-haired figure saw as he floated in the sky and cast a detached gaze downward. A world now on the point of extinction. A smile formed on his face. Then, lowering his head and staring at the crimson-eyed male below him, the white-haired individual's eyes rippled slightly. The crimson-colored-eyed male, Kevin, stared back and silence enveloped the world. While neither of the two figures spoke, a great deal of energy erupted from their respective bodies before they silently collided. Everything below them crumbled as a powerful wave from their collision fanned out. Finally, after an unknown period of time, Kevin opened his mouth. Jezebeth. His soft voice traveled through every corner of the world. Yet, deep-seated hatred could be felt in his voice as he spoke. Staring at Kevin below, Jezebeth closed his eyes slightly before the smile on his face deepened ever so slightly. "How have you been? It's been a while since we've last seen each other." Kevin didn't say anything in response. Instead, the red hue surrounding his body became more intense. The sword in his hand glowed in a majestic color and the world around him shook fiercely. In spite of that, Jezebeth showed no change in his expression. Rather, he seemed even more relaxed as he watched Kevin glare in his direction. "You should already know by now that your efforts are futile, right?" His words echoed throughout the globe. Kevin's expression sank. "Not only do you not have the strength to beat me, but you very well know what consequences my defeat will lead to, don't you?" Jezebeth's body gently floated toward the ground. "To the records, I'm Cancer. Something that they weren't able to predict or find out until it was too late. By the time they discovered my presence, I was already reaching the peak of this world." His feet landed on the ground. With both hands behind his back, Jezebeth leisurely strolled around. Kevin could only watch him from the distance without doing anything. You might wonder, how is it possible for the records to have not detected my presence when they are supposed to be so powerful? Well, the answer is rather simple. The records aren't exactly a sentient being, rather they are a primal source code of the universe that has basic cognitive abilities. Almost like an infant. It will only act when it finds its existence is under threat. Jezebeth chuckled a little. "And that existence is none other than me." A majestic white glow erupted from Jezebeth's body as he extended both of his hands. Kevin fiercely stabbed his sword on the ground and held his ground as a gust of powerful wings swept past his body, sending his hair and clothes fluttering away. The gale didn't last for long as it soon calmed down. And with regards to their reaction to finding the existence that is threatening them, Jezebeth met Kevin's eyes. "That's where you came into play. Desperate to stop me from reaching them, the records created you. Everything that happened to you in the past was all premeditated by the records." "Stop talking," Kevin mumbled while he clenched his teeth and glared at Jezebeth. But in spite of that, he never once moved to fight Jezebeth. It wasn't that he couldn't, it was that he didn't want to. "Want to know a funny coincidence?" Jezebeth suddenly asked. Kevin didn't respond. "Don't you think we have a lot of things in common? From our red eyes, our past, which is shockingly similar. With both our parents dying from a very young age, both from outsiders, leaving us orphaned. Do you really think it's a coincidence?" Kevin didn't answer. He honestly didn't know, nor did he want to hear the answer, but it wasn't as if Jezebeth could read his thoughts. And even if he could, he would have probably still continued speaking. His next words thunderously burst inside Kevin's head. "Nothing is a coincidence. You were created by the records and modeled after me. From your past to your unique features. You were modeled by the records to resemble me because you were created for the sole purpose of killing me. But..." He tilted his head slightly as he looked at Kevin. "But I swear I could remember you having white hair in the past. What happened to your hair?" "It's none of your concern, Jezebeth," Kevin cut off in an aggressive manner. "Oh." Jezebeth inched closer to Kevin, surprised by his reaction. "Is there something you are hiding from me?" he asked in a curious manner. Kevin instinctively took a step back when he saw Jezebeth nearing him. "Ah." His eyes opened wide when he realized what he had done. But it was too late. Jezebeth noticed his reaction and smiled deeply. "But I can tell." He inched even closer. "I can tell that you can't kill me. I don't know exactly why, but for some reason, I know that you are purposely not killing me despite having the power to do so." Jezebeth's head tilted a little. "Now, what I really want to know is, why? Why are you refusing to kill me? ===. Synchronization complete. +5%. ===. A low chime rang inside Kevin's head and his eyes opened. "Why am I refusing to kill you?" Taking a deep breath, Kevin's crimson-red eyes flashed with a cold light. Then, focusing his attention on the red book in his hand, he mumbled. "Because your death will destroy the universe." Embarrassment. That was how one would describe how Azeroth felt in the last couple of decades. He felt utter embarrassment. Ever since his castle had been infiltrated and he had lost track of the thieves who had stolen his possessions, Azeroth had become the butt of the jokes of the other marquee-ranked demons present in Amora. That wasn't all. During his fight against the Orson chief, he was suddenly ambushed out of nowhere by another orc who appeared to be of similar strength to his. Although he had managed to escape back then, he had lost a major part of his territory on that day. Defeated and embarrassed, Azeroth became the laughingstock of the demons. "Bastard! I'll kill you when I find you." Since that day, not a single day has gone by that he hasn't reminded himself that he will exact justice on those who have mistreated him. For years he had been biding his time, gathering his forces and improving himself. In those years he had managed to remove several people who had mocked him in the past, including high-ranking demons that were on the same level as him. However, he was never satisfied with their removal. And there was a simple reason for that. The reason was that he knew. He knew who the main culprits were. The people who had infiltrated his castle and robbed him of his possessions. They were the ones who were responsible for all of his troubles. And for over 60 years he had been waiting for those individuals to come back to this planet. There were several items in his possession that were connected to him by blood. If ever the thieves who infiltrated his castle and robbed him of his possessions showed up in Amora, he would know in an instant. And he finally managed to sense his items again. After 60 agonizing years, the thieves were back and they were in the exact location where the orc was, proving to him that they were working together. Or at least knew each other. "Ergen!" Azeroth suddenly shouted at top of his lungs while he walked across a long corridor that was blanketed with a red carpet. Immediately after his words came out, a creature appeared out of nowhere. "You have called." "I have." Azeroth replied in a deadpan tone. "Gather all of the forces. We're moving." "Gather all of our forces?" Ergno's eyes shot wide open. "But..." "Shut up and do what I say." Azeroth cut the demon with a glare. Clenching his teeth, he spat through his gnashed teeth. "Prepare for war." It was finally time for him to reveal his fangs after he had hidden for so long. So what if his actions resulted in the demon delegate to get angry at him? In his mind, there was nothing else but revenge. Chapter 619 Submission 1. If there was anything that changed during the 2 years I devoted to training, it was my combat approach. Even while I continued to use the keiki style as I had in the past, I was able to modify it in my own unique way. I didn't need to grip my sword and hang on to the sheath like I had in the past. The only thing I needed to do now was to gently tap my finger in the air. When I sheathed and unsheathed my sword, the speed at which I could do so increased to the point where those of a high level could no longer see it with their unaided eyes. To those on the outside, it appeared as though I was simply pointing at my enemies and killing them, but in reality I was actually doing the same movement as in the past but a lot faster. But it wasn't just that. I was also able to tap into a new power. Mana agglomeration. Typically one would form an armor when reaching this level. Sort of like Monica with her shining orange armor. I knew this because she tended to show this off quite often. Liam could also somewhat do it, although his armor was a bit strange. How could I describe it? Let's just say that it is severely lacking in the defensive department with gaping holes everywhere. In any case, it was different for me. Unlike them, I never created an armor for myself. Rather, I came up with something else. Mana aggregation functioned by physically bending the mana in the air to your will and controlling it in such a way that you could make it into a tangible material that could be used to cover the human body as armor. I could now summon actual sword energy out of thin air by bending the mana in the air to my desire. Due to my 2-year research of the psion composition in the air and the pill I took after returning from the conference, I was able to regulate my psions to an extreme degree, which was necessary for my new technique. In a way, I was confident in facing any opponent of the S+ rank range without feeling the littlest of intimidation from them. I was jolted out of my thoughts by the presence of several shadows in the air. Squinting my eyes, I casually tapped the air. Thump, thump. The 2 shadows fell from the sky after I pointed in their direction, revealing the figures of a couple of demons. They crashed against the hard ground, sending dirt flying in the air. At the moment, over 10 different birds, each with a different size and strength, were circling the skies above us. I glanced at Ava as we walked silently side by side in their direction. Quick question, Ava. How many beasts can you control at the same time at the moment? About 40. Ava replied, leaving me impressed. 40 beasts at the same time. That was practically a small army. It looks like she has made a lot of progress over the past few years. She was the only one I hadn't sparred with because she was out searching for monsters to tame, unlike the others who didn't need to do that. It also explained why I didn't know how many beasts she could summon at the same time. Your rank is B+, right? Right. Ava nodded her head and I fell into deep contemplation. Eventually, my eyes paused on the flute that was in her hands. I see. So does that mean you're about to unlock the third seal of your flute? Emichum. Ava confirmed. When I reach A-rank, I will be able to break the next seal and have the chance to take more beasts and help them improve faster. There were hints of visible excitement in her voice when she said the last words. Clearly, she loved the idea of her and her pets becoming stronger. With her being in my group, I was naturally pleased with this development. That's good, keep up. I wasn't even able to finish when I heard someone's voice coming from the distance. Ren, I can see the fortress and castle in the distance. What should we do now? The voice belonged to none other than Ryan, who seemed a lot more comfortable walking around. At least compared to when he first arrived here. With my feet coming to a halt, I thought for a moment before shifting my attention toward Angelica. Call for him. Got it. Wearing a solemn look on her face, Angelica closed her eyes. At the same time in the said castle. The empty, yet grandiose halls within the castle were currently filled with several figures. All of them were the highest-ranking members of the Orson race left in Amora. Silig sat on a big throne at the opposite end of the room. The hall was completely or at least partially surrounded by his presence, as another, slightly lesser presence also filled the hallways. It belonged to none other than Omgolung, the previous Orson chief. All of the Orson delegates' attention was currently fixated on Omgolung, and the entire room was dead silent. The arrival of the former chief caused some people to express obvious happiness, shock, and sadness. Nonetheless, it wasn't something they could vividly show, as they all focused their attention back on Silig, who quietly saw on the throne without saying anything. Here. His labored breathing resonated across the space, shaking it along with him. Prepare yourselves. He finally spoke, allowing for his deep and coarse voice to echo throughout the entire room. Pressing both of his hands on the side arms of the throne, he slowly stood up from his seat and scanned everyone in the hall with his eyes. His physique exuded a deep green tint that heightened the tension already present in the space. None of the orcs present dared to move a muscle as they all focused their attention on Silig, who was about to speak. His next words stirred the heart of everyone present. It's time for us to start another war. It is time for us to take the initiative and recapture some of the territories we have lost. Shifting his attention toward Omgolung, Silig announced. Omgolung will lead the army going forward as its top general. He'll be running the army, and his words will count just as much as mine. The entire hall stirred as they looked at Omgolung, a figure whom they used to follow in the past. Sure, he was a lot skinnier and weaker than back then, but the presence he gave out did not lose out from the one Silig gave out. They happily accepted Silig's orders. Yes. All the representatives shouted in unison. Silig was left satisfied when he saw this. That's good. I would like it for you all to prepare for war. Starting tomorrow we will officially go to... Silig stopped himself mid-sentence and his face changed. This obviously did not go unnoticed by the orcs, who looked at each other and wondered what was going on. It was unusual for Silig to behave this way. Just as someone was about to voice out their concerns, Silig's deep voice echoed throughout the halls. His expression was unusually serious. We have guests. Someone go and receive them. 10 minutes after sending a message to Silig, we headed toward the castle in the distance. We didn't make it far before we were forced to stop. It looks extremely guarded. At the base of the castle, hundreds of orcs appeared in my vision. A number of Spartan stone homes could be seen behind them. They seemed to be the first line of defense. What should we do now? Leopold asked while he gazed at the numerous orcs in the distance. Please don't tell me that we have to directly break through their formation, because I don't think we won't. I cut Leopold out of his delusions. Ads by Pub Future. Then, squinting my eyes, I scanned the distance. Just wait here for now. If my estimates aren't wrong, we will be escorted into the castle in a bit. Escorted? Leopold's face was filled with doubt as he looked at the orcs in the distance. Really? Yes, really. I couldn't blame Leopold for being doubtful. I would likewise be skeptical after getting a good look at how menacing the orcs in the distance appeared. Thankfully, we didn't have to wait for long as a group of orcs descended down the mountain. Their entire presence was a stark above the guards guarding the base. and in their immediate presence, the orcs all lowered their heads as a form of respect. It was their presence that signaled to me that they were the guard that was meant to escort us to the top. Hence, looking at the others, I nudged them with my head before directly heading to where the orcs were. Let's go. Chapter 6:20 Submission. It's been a while since we've last seen each other. I hope you haven't forgotten about me, Silig. I stood face to face with Silig in front of the castle's central square, which had an opening above that allowed one to glimpse the sky above. 6 years. That was how much time had passed since we had last met each other. Staring deeply into Silig's eyes, I started to reminisce about the time we met. Back then I was only at around E or D rank at the time. Silig was an existence that I could only look up to in those times. I used to envy his strength, though. Standing right in front of him and meeting his gaze, I felt his previous impression inside of my mind crumble. He seemed less intimidating and impressive than he had in the past, which may have been due to the fact that I had to deal with more formidable opponents in the years that followed my trip to Amora, or simply because my strength had grown to the point where there were only a few people in the world that could pose a threat to me. Regardless, that didn't matter to me at the moment. I had a goal to accomplish. I have not forgotten about you, human. Silig's low and deep voice echoed. The surroundings shook ever so slightly at the tone of his voice. I nodded my head slightly when I heard his words. Taking a glimpse at my surroundings and seeing the central square surrounded by several orcs, I mentioned. So you still remember that you're working for me, right? The atmosphere froze over as soon as my words resounded in the air. The orcs that were standing by the side all released their auras. How dare you? Who are you to speak to our chief like that? I ignored the enraged roads coming from the orcs and kept my gaze on Silig. My expression was extremely serious. The tensions in the space rose to an all-time high. It then all came crashing down when one of the orcs rushed toward me. The charging orc was stopped in his tracks when Silig reached out his hand in his direction. The surroundings trembled as his thunderous voice reverberated throughout the area. Stop. He has indeed improved. Taking note of the power hidden behind the voice, I silently praised. Nonetheless, I knew that this was just a cheap trick used by him to intimidate me. Chief. The orc and the ones around us looked at Silig with questionable looks. Silig glanced at them for a short moment before focusing his attention back on me. I remember our deal. Well, isn't that great? I clapped my hands, only to stop when I heard Silig speak once more. And, my eyes narrowed slightly. Was he perhaps going to reject the deal? His next words surprised me. And I am not against it. Without your aid, I would have never been able to rise to my current position. It would be against my nature to repay your kindness with malice. Honest, I like it. I guess I was worrying too much before. Silig was really intending to keep his word. But, or was he? My eyes narrowed once more. I continued to look Silig right in the eyes. But what? Seeing him struggling to say something, I kept an impassive look. Actually, I already knew what he was going to say. I was merely pretending to not know about his circumstances at the moment. It became clear to me that Silig had his priorities elsewhere. The fact that the previous leader was here was a testament to this. But I don't think I will be able to meet your conditions. For the sake of my people, I cannot leave this place. Is that so? As expected, I got rejected. So far, things were going as I had predicted. Thump. Silig suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground. I understand my errors, but my priorities lie elsewhere. If you are unwilling to accept my decision, I can only resort to a more violent approach. Are you threatening me? I asked while tilting my head to the side. Not once did I ever release my pressure and let him know of my real rank. All I wanted to gauge at the moment was his sincerity, and so far he seemed to be doing well. He'll be a useful addition for when the war starts. The goal was to take over the entire planet and have the orcs build their forces in the meantime. When the third calamity strikes, I plan to create a portal for the orcs to go through and enter Earth. And for that to happen, I needed Silig's complete loyalty. Which was exactly what I was planning on getting at the moment. Hold this for me. Unzipping my hoodie, I handed it to Angelica. Then, stretching my shoulders, I asked, where should we do this? I went straight to the point. By a more violent approach, he was clearly pointing toward a fight. I avoided wasting time by chatting about frivolous topics and got right to the subject. Plus, I wasn't against this idea as I got myself ready. Here. Silig replied while he focused his gaze on the other orcs present. Bulum. He deeply shouted in his own language. We were previously speaking in demonic language, which was the universal language for all races. Right after his words faded, all of the orcs around us moved away, clearing the space for the two of us to fight. Should I use mana or not? Narrowing my eyes and staring at Silig, I eventually made up my mind. Let's not. I then took a stance. It's about time I tested just how strong my body became over the past 2 years. Silig stared at his adversary as he felt a range of emotions wash over him. He was of course grateful for the opportunity that the human before him had given him. Without him, he would have likely continued to serve as one of the orcs' generals and perished along the way without anyone ever remembering him. Even then, despite the fact that he felt grateful, Silig had his own priorities and unfortunately, couldn't keep the part of his pledge he had made with the human. I will not kill him and send him away as a token of apology. Silig couldn't quite tell the strength of the human before him. However, he could tell from a glance that he had undergone massive improvements. He was definitely a lot stronger than he was when he first came here. Even then, it wasn't anything that made Silig feel threatened. Taking into consideration how much time elapsed, Silig had a rough estimate of Ren's strength. It should be at around B rank. A far cry from his strength, which of the S rank. Taking a position in the middle of the flat surface, Silig calmly observed his surroundings. His eyes then fell on several individuals. A tall man with yellow eyes, another human with curly black hair and monolid eyes, and the demoness he had signed a contract with a while back. This was actually the first time he had actually met her in person, and her strength was indeed something to be wary of. They are strong. More so for the man who had yellow eyes. His entire presence was something that made the back of his hair stand. He was scary. Extremely scary. Him aside, the pressure that the other two gave out was nothing to scoff at. The other ones beside them also looked like decently strong humans, which surprised Silig quite a bit. Shifting his attention back toward Ren, Silig silently praised inside of his heart. To have attracted so many talented and strong individuals by his side, he indeed is someone worth following. Alas, if only the circumstances weren't like this. Are you ready? Silig asked while jumping around on the spot. I'm ready. Ren replied back while he took a rather lax stance. It's filled with openings. Silig thought when he stared at Ren. With just a glance he could tell just how many openings there were. With 70 years of fighting under his belt, he was able to easily tell this much. Let's make this quick. He thought to himself. Alright, come at me. Silig suddenly heard Ren's words and paused for a moment. He then took another look at him and was left surprised by how relaxed he seemed. Why is he so confident? Instead of leaping to the conclusion that Ren was conceited, Silig immediately grew apprehensive. Silig frequently encountered opponents who concealed their strength before a fight, which often lead to him underestimating them. He may have survived those ordeals in the past, but they also taught him a valuable lesson. Could he also be hiding his real strength? Ads by Pub Future. As Silig's body started to take on a dark green color, the ground beneath him shattered. Clenching his fist tightly, he twisted his torso and flexed his back muscles. Once again focusing his attention on Ren, he pressed his foot against the ground and his vision blurred. In a split second he was already before Ren and he immediately punched out. Boom! A thunderous explosion rang in the air as massive shockwaves swept the surroundings. The power of the attack was so great that some of the orcs and the humans' followers had to retreat a short distance. When they finally managed to turn their attention back to the battle, they noticed Silig gazing at Ren with bewildered eyes. It didn't take long for them to take on a similar look, especially when they saw how Silig's big fist was stopped by Ren's single finger. You